Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Losing the Relationship to Suicide. In this video, I was able to have a conversation with Phillip Tyler about losing his son, Devon. Phil has had a long career of campus security, law enforcement, and military service, and now he shares his story of healing all over the United States. With such a tragic subject of the suicide loss of a child, Philip is still able to bring out a message of hope. And for this episode, he doesn't hold anything back. Here we go. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this episode on our Journey Through Grief YouTube. I'm excited. We're starting a new series just talking about relationships and how they were affected when we lost someone to suicide. I thought it was important to, uh, have these conversations about what that looks like for us after we have lost someone. And everybody's story is different, and how those relationships impacted us. All these stories are different, so I'm really excited. I have my friend Phillip Tyler here with me today. Philip and I have known each other for probably 7 years, I want to say now. And so, Phil, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself, tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and
Yeah,
we'll get into it.
wonderful. First of all, thank you, Tracy, for all you do. Really, this discussion is so important, and it's so close to my heart because really, when I did first meet you 7 years ago, it was helping me through my grief at a my first loss survivors event. So you have a special place in my heart, my family's heart. So my name is Phil Tyler. I am a loss survivor. I'm a father. My current role is the Associate Director of Campus Security and Public Safety at Gonzaga University. Go Zags. Um, I am a board member of AFSP Washington. I'm also a board member of the Spokane Fire Department Foundation. I have sat on several boards during the course of my career, from the Mayor's Mental Health Task Force to the Suicide Prevention and Awareness Board. I'm a former Air Force airman, so I'm a veteran. I was a law enforcement specialist in the United States Air Force, and I spent 16 years with Spokane County Sheriff's Office in the jail division as a lieutenant for the jail division there. Um, that's really enough, and I really would just say to jump into our conversation
Sure.
because that really,
Yeah,
my experiences don't frame me; the experience does.
right. And I think, your accolades and achievements, are a testament to anybody can lose someone to suicide. Doesn't
Sure.
matter, your stature, doesn't matter what careers you've had, or, what positions you've held at various, organizations, right? I mean, it affects, suicide affects everybody in all walks of life,
Mhm.
truly. So, tell us a little bit about who you lost, how long ago you lost him, and, we'll talk about him a little bit.
Yeah. So we lost our son, Devon, on November 28th, 2017. It was a Tuesday. He was 22 years old. I remember the day. I remember the day of the week. There are some things that are just etched into your memory that you'll never forget, and that's one of those dates for me. Surely, just like when you lost your daughter. Um, I recall that Monday prior, he had sent me a text because I was down at City Hall testifying on an ordinance in our local city here. At the time, I think I was still serving as the president of the Spokane NAACP. And as he would normally do on a regular day, he would stop by the house with a dozen chocolate chip cookies from McDonald's, and we would just sit out on the front porch and just talk about life, think how things were going, and what our week looked like, what the weekend was looking like. And that Monday, I wasn't home, and he had texted me and said he dropped him off, left him on the porch. He knew I was busy, and he just wanted to tell me that he loved me. And that would be the last text message that he sent me. I remember texting him back and saying, hey, I'm at city council. I'm busy, son. I love you too. And what was unbeknownst to myself and the rest of my family was that he sent a message similar to that to all of us, telling us that he loved us. We didn't discover that till the memorial. So the next day, I got a call from my former neighbor. Her name is Cindy Peterson, and I love her to this day. Um, Devon was renting our former home with three of his best friends. And Cindy had noticed a bunch of emergency vehicles parked out front of the home and lights and sirens. And she texted me. I was living probably about 6 minutes away at the time. And she said, hey, there's a lot of emergency vehicles over at the house. You know what's going on with Devon? And I said, no. And I did like any parent would do. I texted him. That's how we communicated at the time. And I got no response. And of course, I did what any parent would do after that. I texted him with punctuation, call me back, exclamation point.
Right.
And got no response. So then I called him. And the phone call went to voicemail. And I called his mother, and her phone call went to voicemail. So at that point, as a parent, you're really concerned, and I was really close, some 6 minutes away. I jumped in my car and I drove to our former home. And when I rounded the corner, I've been in this profession long enough to know the level of emergency vehicles there was more than just some small emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And when I parked my car and got out, I recall the former fire chief, his name is Brian Schaefer, who I love dearly, walking up to me from across the street. Now, mind you, fire chiefs don't respond to every emergency in the city of Spokane, but Brian knew the address. Brian knew the name. And when I stepped out of my car, he walked up to me along with the police captain, Tracy Midel, whom I love dearly as well. And they just gave me a big hug. And I knew at that
Yeah, I was
point.
gonna say that must have terrified you at that point.
Yeah. And I knew at that point. And, I started to cry. And they were, had tears in their eyes. And I said, what happened? And they said, Devon's gone. And, at that point I went into, a full body shock, right? Numbness. I remember getting angry and trying to get through them to my home. And then his mother came out and she was crying and she had told me what happened. And I wanted to get to the garage where he remained, and no one would allow me to get there. And, at that point I was so angry and mystified that no one was going to hold me back, Tracy. I mean, it took several deputies, firefighters, to hold me back. And I called my wife and I said, you need to come home, come to the old house. Something happened to Devon. And she didn't understand what I said. I didn't give her any details. And she arrived there and we finally went inside and started talking with the sheriff's chaplain who was there and some of the firefighters and officers that were there. And, the reality hit, his younger brother was there and his older sister. And, the funny thing was that this would be the first time that my children saw me cry. And what's so sad and upsetting about that, even to this day, Tracy, is that there's guilt in me because I never really truly expressed emotion to my family, my boys, and I think they masked their emotions the same way.
Yeah.
Now, that a lot of that comes from how we were raised, right? I was raised by two Black parents from the South, and they raised us to never show emotion, outside the front doors because they were wanting to see us be weak. And I tell people this, and I'll share this with you and our listeners, that we as human beings are all formed creatures, and we're either malformed, deformed, conformed, or transformed. And being raised by two Black folks from the South who were raised in the Jim Crow era. I was malformed. I was raised not to trust white
Yeah.
people, not to show emotion around white people. I was raised by a military father, um, who was the working parent, and my mother wasn't working, so that it deformed my image of what a relationship looked like, in a parental relationship. And I never saw my father cry in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, and then I
Well, then
went
you
into
went into a whole military and life,
when I went into
law
the
enforcement
service,
background. And
absolutely. And
same
I
thing.
was 17 years old when I went into the service, and I witnessed my first suicide at 17 years old in basic training. And I remember, Tracy, the drill instructor, coming in after we summoned him for this emergency, where they removed the body. And after they removed the body, they ushered us all back in, and they simply berated the poor airman that took his life. He wasn't strong enough. He was weak. You are far superior to him. This is why you're in our military. Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And I conformed to that behavior from 17 to 50. And at 50 years old, after losing my son to suicide, I was finally transformed. I realized that this whole behavior set of being strong, and not showing emotion, and manning up, and all of this nonsense was simply that. It was
Yeah.
nonsense. And the transformation I made as a result, sadly, of losing my own child, was that I became more empathetic. And it took me 50 years in order to learn that. And I live today trying to tell people, don't think that asking for help, don't think that showing emotion, don't think that, you know, um, realizing that there are some things in the world we can't handle alone
Right.
is bad. And I've worked to reframe this nonsense of what it means to be weak. And when I
Right.
say that, Tracy, and we spoke about this on many times, WEAK is now an acronym for me in all of the engagements I go out and speak with. WEAK, willing to express adult kindness. And had I been able to be weak, willing to
Hmm.
express adult kindness throughout my adult life, I'd probably have my adult son with me today, because he would have learned that being weak, willing to express adult kindness, showing emotions, was part of being human. It had nothing to do with being a strong man, or being, you know, manning up, and all this nonsensical behavior. So
Sure.
yeah,
You know, what I end up telling people is we certainly don't know what's going on in somebody's mind, when they make that choice. And I think we get kind of a bum rap as parents because, I mean, I know, we're pretty much, the same age. And so, when back in the late 80s, early 90s, when we're having these kiddos, it's kind of expected that, you're going to have this child and you're going to raise this child perfectly and they're going to go out and they're going to
yeah,
be, productive citizens. And, kind of a fear was instilled, at least in me, of I better do it right because,
yeah,
child protective services could be around the corner any minute if I don't do it right. And so then,
yeah,
a suicide comes along and of course any mental health struggle right before that, and it's like it perpetuates that guilt,
absolutely. Oh
that
boy,
parents feel
oh
because
boy,
it's like, but I was supposed to XYZ,
yes,
and I was supposed to
yes.
give this person to be a healthy,
Yeah,
productive citizen. And I have
amen.
so many parents, that come up support groups and at the conferences and just say, I should have said this or I should have said that. And how come I didn't know that this was going to
I
happen? And I say, well, we all did crazy, stupid stuff when we were teens or young adults. And, did we tell people before we were going to go do those stupid things? Did you tell your parents you were going to sneak out of the house and go to a
no,
party? Or, no, you didn't. Or you were going to skip school and they just thought you were at school all day because you came home on time.
yeah,
That's what Chelsea was good at. She was out at lunch, going to the mall, and I didn't know any better because she was home when she was supposed to be. And
yeah.
we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what they don't tell us.
And
Um,
this is the beauty of the journey through grief and having conversations like this and meeting people like yourself. Because I suffered through that same guilt, those same modals of missed opportunity, the could have, should have, would have, as a parent, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
should have seen this. I should have known that. I could have done this. I could have done that. And that guilt is just immense. But what I've learned when I was transformed is that there's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as immortality.
right.
And as of yet, there isn't a time machine to go back and do over.
Yeah,
So once we release those things and understand those things, we're able to process that hurt and that grief. I can't do it over.
yeah,
We're all going to die someday.
yeah.
And
Well,
there's no such perfection. As a parent,
right.
as a child, as a society. So, but it's hard to get through that when you're in the midst of it without help from others. And surely, lost survivors, and those events, meeting you, have helped me get through those process. And really, it is created this post-traumatic growth in me as a result of the loss.
Yeah, because I mean, we have research and data out there that, lost survivors that don't get support and help and have events to go to and have peer support groups available to them, their risk also goes up. You know,
Absolutely.
certainly don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously more that can be done out in our society. And you know me, I'm on my soapbox all the time, you
And
know,
I appreciate
and
it.
advocating for our poor loss survivors that,
Yeah.
I hear the same stories of, I don't know what's out there. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to find XYZ resource. As like, for the social media and range, right, that we have just on the internet, people shouldn't be struggling to get what they
Yeah.
need in real
Yeah.
time, you know.
I will
So
tell you,
yeah,
you know, social media, remember after I came out of my funk, I remember telling, sharing my story on social media, and I couldn't get through it without crying. And it was at that point, I wasn't trying to hide my tears from anyone. I was a grieving father. Before I was transformed, I would surely play that role, put the mask on, and have a smiling face, but I got through it. But I tell you, when I did share that, even with all the emotion, it was beautifully received, and people reached out because there was a time, just like I was always constantly in motion in my community and doing things. But when you lose a family member, a child, you can be lonely in a sea of 250,000 people because they
absolutely.
simply do not know how to respond to you. And some don't even want to talk with you because they're afraid. And that's one of the worst feelings you could have as a loss survivor. Say something to someone, even if you misspeak, at least they know that you see them. You aren't trying to judge them. And they need that connection, that contact point.
Yeah. I've been holding webinars this month about fear and fear surrounding suicide. And one of the common themes has been, we're scared to talk to loss survivors
Hmm.
because we don't want to make their pain worse. We don't want
Right.
to make them cry, or we don't want to remind them that that they're going through this. I
Yeah,
guarantee for all the listeners, we didn't forget, and we know what we're going through. But
for
we
sure.
just need that, arm around the shoulder, maybe a little squeeze.
Yeah,
I'm here for you. I have so many loss survivors say, I don't need someone, to say something. Give me the magic pill on how to make me feel better. I just need
yeah,
to have somebody say, hey, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you.
absolutely. Yeah,
And we know it can't be fixed. There's no
right.
way it could be fixed. If it could be
Yeah.
fixed, we'd fix it ourselves.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. For
but
sure.
there's no way. So,
Yeah.
we got to move past this fear of consoling other people. We
Yeah. Yeah,
we got to
I
get through
don't
this
I don't
grief.
get that, when people pass of cancer or those kind of things. people are quick to respond to that, and it's
Sure.
because society has allowed us to talk about those things. We haven't got to a point in society where we're free and open and vulnerable enough to talk about suicide. It happens
Yeah.
daily,
Yeah.
right? It
Right.
happens, hour by hour, right? Before we finish this call, people will lose their lives in the world. And you said something that made me think that people are concerned that it will, not help you heal if they say something. Look, nothing's going to ever change our grief. And I always describe it to people as this: there's a hole in my heart, and it will always remain there. What has changed is it hasn't decreased in size. What has happened is I have been insulated by those like yourself and others that have came alongside me, that have offered support, that have offered guidance, a lending an ear, a shoulder, a hug, as you said. So it insulates that hole so the pain is not as great as it was on November 28th. But it will never go away.
No, no, you
You can
just,
help insulate that pain by
yeah,
being there for someone, by asking those questions that you talked about, by just saying, how can I help? And that
yeah,
really makes a difference. And every time I get asked that question, and even more importantly, when someone says, what was his name? And I get to say his name again.
yeah. It's
Hmm.
awesome when we get to do that.
It is, I mean, it really moves the heart for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, as you know, there's so many different complexities that come along with grief.
Sure.
Do we continue to celebrate holidays the same way? We acknowledge, our loved one's birthday. And,
Hmm.
you've got the people with the school of thought of, well, they're gone. We just don't celebrate them anymore. And then you have people, uh, like me, I go out and I get a birthday cake every year on Chelsea's birthday.
Yeah.
So here I'm dieting, so it's a little smaller cake, but that's okay. It's the thought that counts, and
Yeah.
we go out
And,
to
and
dinner.
it's unique to everyone, right? I don't do uh, big Thanksgivings any longer because that was the last holiday we had together,
Sure.
and it is just too tough for me still. Some 7 years on, um, because initially I was, having a table setting that was empty,
Hmm.
and I thought that was a way to honor and memorialize, but it was too tough. Uh, and but I'm unique. Some people may continue to do those kind of things, but find your grief, find your space, and grieve in the way you grieve. Don't let anyone tell you you have to go through these 5, 6, 7 stages. They're linear. All of this nonsense. It's just like manning up or being a strong woman. All that stuff is nonsense. You
Oh,
do you in grief, right? And find your pathway through.
yeah, totally agree. Um, so, in your process, so right after you lost Devon,
Mhm.
did you, well, a couple different things. First of all, how was it to go back to work? Was your employer
I didn't
sympathetic?
go back to work for weeks. At the time, I was working at Gonzaga still, and the university, from the president to my director, were amazing people. Amazing people. Um, I remember walking back into the door and just people just hugged me, and I lost it. I lost it, and I wasn't. It didn't matter, right? Um, they gave me the space to grieve. They all showed up at his memorial service. Um, but it was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird because I would walk by some folks and they would not want to make eye contact,
Mhm.
knowing that I had lost because they didn't know what to say
Right.
or they thought I'd be upset. And then I'd walk by some and we just had these long, extended conversations, and they were beautiful. Um, but overall, my particular department was absolutely amazing.
Because
They
I've heard
provided
some horror
space.
stories. I've heard
Oh
stories
man,
that, they go back to work and they get immediately called into the HR department. And they're told, we expect you to function up to the caliber you did
sure.
before this happened. And,
Yeah,
you've been off for, sometimes a few days.
yeah,
And, you should be good by now. So, you know,
yeah.
And I hear, like I said, I hear some of these stories and
Yeah.
I'm
Well, and
horrified.
that's the
So I'm
problem
glad
with
when
the
I hear a
workplace,
good one.
right? That's the problem with the workspace that sees their personnel as personnel numbers, not persons. And I can tell you, at least my employer did not see me as a personnel member. They saw me as a person. So much so that our officers uh, now wear this lapel, this collar pin for suicide prevention, hoping to spark conversation with our young students, our staff or faculty, just asking, can I ask you why that you wear that pin? And it sparks a conversation. And I would tell you this, Tracy, we have connected, and I am certain we have saved lives of students because of simply having those conversations and then directing them to appropriate resources when they became vulnerable enough to share those stories with us. So that's
Awesome.
what I got in return when I returned to work.
Yeah. Sometimes, it takes those little sparks of just,
Yeah.
humanness,
Yep.
the word humanness. Things like that that just kind of propel us forward a little bit
Yeah.
more to know
Yeah.
that something's going, in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, I was
Um,
just blessed to be at Gonzaga for our laws. They were wonderful. They really believe in their Jesuit values and cure personal health, which is care of the whole person. And they did that for me and my family. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I worked in a very small company. I had maybe, 5 people in the office itself, and then I had like 12 people that came in and out various days of the week. Um, and they were great. They came to the memorial as well. Um, and then about a month later, I kind of fell into that conversation. It's time to, get back to normal and
Yeah.
not make mistakes, in your data entry and it just stuff
Yeah.
that's like, wow.
Yeah.
Some days my thought process was, you know what, you're lucky I'm even here.
Oh,
You're
wow.
lucky I didn't
What
quit.
does normal even mean? My son was a big motorcycle enthusiast. I would sit in my office, and every time I heard a motorcycle rev down the street, now on a college campus, it would
Yeah,
just send emotions reverberating through my body.
yeah,
Because that was our point of contact. I was always in fear as a parent because he was one of those daredevil young men who had a GoPro and was riding wheelies. He was a really talented rider, but he was always driving so fast. And I would always think, I'm going to lose him to a motorcycle accident. And I'd always tell him, when you come home, because he lived so close, drive down the street. He'd give me a little rev on the motorcycle, and I know he was getting home safely. And so whenever I hear that, it's a sound for me that takes me back to November 2017.
now do you still feel that same level of pain
In the
when you
evenings, when I hear him in the evenings, during the daytime, no, but in the evenings, yes.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, it's amazing things that just stick in
yeah,
our memory, and they'll affect us for potentially the rest of our life.
yeah,
Yeah,
possibly.
say everybody's different. I had a hard time with music right
Mm,
after he died for probably the first 2 or 3 years. Music was interesting because I found that the things that I liked to listen to before she died, I could care less if I heard them after she died. And she was into like Panic at the Disco and all this stuff that I didn't listen to, but it was popular, at that
sure.
time. And so you go into a store and it's playing over the PA system,
Yeah,
or, it's everywhere.
yeah,
Um, and I had a few stores that I just walked out of because the song that we played at her memorial service, is on the PA system. And
yeah.
I'd be like, nope, out the door I'd go because I knew, I couldn't handle it yet.
Hmm.
And now of course those songs aren't popular anymore. So very rarely I hear one.
Sure.
Heard one about 6 months ago and didn't react. Actually, I started singing along. It was kind of creepy, really. And I thought, wow, that must be, some healing because I wasn't like, trying to break the radio or leave the room or
Yeah,
anything like
that's
that.
beautiful.
So,
Yeah,
so did you find, so, work was great. They were very helpful.
yeah.
What
I
about
wouldn't say
other
it was
people?
great. One thing
Tolerable?
is it's hard to focus, right? When you're coming back to those things. It was the people were great. The work it was a chore getting back to, right?
Routine? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I
Well,
had a
because you're in
routine.
that brain fog. you're in the brain
Yeah.
fog and things
Yeah.
aren't firing off in your brain quite, like you're used to.
Yeah.
And then you got to go and do these tasks, and
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
easy.
And there'd come a day late in the week where I'd come home and I'd expect him to be there on the
Mhm.
porch waiting for me.
Yeah.
It wouldn't occur. So yeah.
So did you have any issue with like friends that you had when Devon died that just disappeared? You haven't even talked to since then, or people that kind of ghosted you and
Yeah,
left?
no. His roommates, his close friends, they really stay in contact. Now that it's getting less frequent now, but I mean they're older young men now and doing their things. So I don't expect it to be in the frequency it was, but you know, I became such an advocate, after attending that Lost Survivors Day, that I was always bringing people in to the fold. So even if they had a sense of trying to distance, I wasn't allowing that to happen.
Ugh.
Uh,
Get back
for
here.
good, bad, or indifferent. And I was just always recruiting people to be a part of events, whether that be suicide prevention walks, loss prevention day, anything, anytime we could share or speak or engage, bringing them in. And so, I had a pretty good platform where I could bring folks to bear and resources to bear. So, I didn't experience any removal because I was always probably so I wouldn't feel that loneliness that we spoke about earlier, dragging them back in, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. I mean, I had people that, knew me before I even had Chelsea, that, then of course, was involved in my kids' lives and all the way, through elementary and middle school, and then, I have a handful that just no call, no show,
Mm.
me off Facebook. I mean, it's
Yeah.
weird, and I
Yeah.
mean, I would like to think it's just unfortunately the culture, right? That
Sure.
people,
Sure. Maybe they're
it's back to
uncomfortable.
that fear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I would hope that that's the case too. I mean, I want to believe, at Gonzaga, we call it the presupposition, that we're presuming good intent from all the people that we come in
Sure,
contact with. But,
absolutely.
I don't know the answer to that. I would hope that is, I will tell you, um, I was friends with our long-serving congresswoman, and she was one of the first persons that called me, after she found out about the loss. And I will tell you, to this day, she calls on his anniversary, and checks in.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
and it is really the power of connection that has kept me going
Yeah.
through these times. I was fortunate enough, to really not to have that
Hmm.
disconnect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a
Mm,
village to get lost survivors through this, absolute devastation and
yes.
class that nobody wants us to belong to. And, here we are. So we kind of, have each other and whoever will, help us
Yeah.
limp through the process.
Yeah. Here we are. And that statement is so profound because there are some parents who aren't here with us today because it was too much.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's important to acknowledge those that did not make it through, like we have thus far. So
Parents have a very high
yeah,
rate of
absolutely. I
by
mean, it's
suicide.
devastating, right?
Hmm.
Devastating to lose a child. Like I met a young lady as a result of your one of your events who had lost a young child. She was 13, and the following year after our lost survivor, her father took his life.
Mm,
Devastating,
yeah,
devastating.
that's
So
heartbreaking. We need to recognize those losses,
absolutely, absolutely.
because people are obviously out there alone and struggling,
Yeah,
and while we
and it
can't make
matters.
them share their pain,
Sure.
if we know that this, here's the list of symptoms that most likely are happening with someone who loses someone to suicide, check in with them when they're saying, oh no,
Oh,
I'm good. Well,
yeah.
no, you're probably not. We know you're
Yes.
probably not.
Don't allow them to get by with that. That was my
Exactly.
monitor all the time. How you doing,
Yeah,
man? I'm good. I'm good.
yeah,
No, Phil. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, obviously, like we've been saying, after the event where I met you, which I think we were just coming up on Devon's first anniversary,
hmm
if I remember right.
hmm
You jumped into tons of advocacy work. You and I have spoken at a few conferences together. Um, so that grief, in one way or another is in our faces all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's our own or whether it's the people that we are, you know, trying to support as
Yeah.
well. Um,
Absolutely.
do you think that that helped in your grief, for your grief
Absolutely.
process to have that constant?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's heavy. There is a heavy burden to it, but I think I was healing through the hurt. Um, I think had I stayed home and not been involved in advocacy, that hurt would have just, for lack of a better term, metastasize across my body, where I could, every hug I received, Tracy, including yours every time we meet, takes a little bit of the pain off of me. And I'm not trying to shed or share that pain with another human being, but it lightens the burden. I like to believe that when I'm sharing my story, when you're sharing the stories, when we're advocating, we're helping ourselves heal through the hurt. It allows us to get it out in a way that is constructive, supportive, and beneficial. Um, and it's intentional, right? We know why we do this work because we don't want anyone else to feel the way we have felt.
Right.
We don't want any parent, any brother, any husband, any sibling, any grandparent to feel what we have felt. And if it takes us to share a piece of ourselves, to unburden ourselves with our stories, to support someone, I'm willing to do that. And I think completely that has helped me heal through the hurt.
And I mean, I want to be honest with our audience to say that, you know, it's not easy, okay, to go out
No.
and, throw our emotions out there into rooms of people. And, our intentions of doing so, are great. This is important, everything that just said. I don't want people to get the idea that this is required of them because they went through this process.
Mm,
But, it leans to the idea that um, sharing the story and, even if whether it's with another loss survivor or it's with a family friend, whoever you have, it's important to get that pain out and it's important to get that out. Um, I've been doing this a little longer than you have. And so, in real time right now today, we're coming up on 18 years that Chelsea's been gone, which doesn't even seem possible at all. Um, but, I've had to really look the last year or so that I was starting to get a little more kind of emotional. I
mm,
won't say depressed, but I was, just kind of non-functional here and
okay.
there. And I thought, well, what is happening? Because I'm used to going out and sharing the
Yeah.
story all the time, which then led to, well, what's wrong with me? And so I spoke to someone who was really well versed, started talking about vicarious trauma
Mm,
and we just keep reliving this trauma because we're
yes.
sharing the story. So that kind of all leads to the idea that's kind of overused is self-care, but
hmm
however you want to term it, be it self-care or just being aware of what's going on in uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
your own emotions. If you're going to get
Absolutely.
into this work and you're going to go out and you're going to share, continuously share stories about your child
hmm
who's no longer here, you gotta balance it with just
Yeah.
taking a break and walking away and finding a hobby that you know takes up some space where you're not constantly in that
No,
emotion.
there's a great tool um, that I use. It's called the pause tool, and um, PAUSE, and the P stands for pay attention to your body, right? Pay attention to your thoughts, and when you're having those feelings, like you're saying, like you're feeling like I'm off. I don't know if it's depression. I'm off. You have to pay attention to that. A is for assess. Assess the emotions that you're feeling and what is creating those emotions or attitudes. The U is to understand the roots of those feelings, right? It's not because we're maybe constantly sharing, oversharing. It's because we have not effectively, or we're still not processing that trauma in our own situation. And the S is, to your point, set boundaries, create space, right? Separation. When maybe that's from friends, maybe that's from telling our story, maybe that's from going to conferences and these kind of things. And the E is to empathize with those that are involved, right? Whether it's a loss survivor, whether it's those that are coming to you asking how can they help you, etc. So that is self-care with intentionality, if you will. So it's a great tool, I think, to
In
use.
fact, I'm going to have you send that to me and then I'll put it in the show notes so that
Oh
whoever
yeah, outstanding.
watches this,
Yeah,
otherwise I'll probably get tons of emails going, what was that thing that Phil said, the
yeah.
pause stand for? So we'll just get it in the show notes right from the get-go. So that,
'Cause I do
yeah.
find myself the same place you are. I'm like, I'm just off today. What's going on, right?
Right.
And it could be just we're wore down, but it could be again we're experiencing this over and over and over every time we share the story, and it's not for everyone. Like you said, I don't want anybody out there listening to think that you have to go share your story, you have to stand up in front of hundreds of people like you have done, like I've done. No, that is not for everyone. And sometimes I've simply turned down occasions to speak, but I try to every time someone requests me to really discuss these things because I need to get them into the light.
Mhm.
When we don't talk about them, people suffer.
You're right. Yeah, that's brilliant. So what do you do for hobbies? What's your go-to when
You
you
know,
need
I'm a
stress?
weightlifter. I like to work out. That's a good stress reliever for me. But I'm a avid gardener. You would not know this. These thumbs are brown, not green. But I love some flowers, right? And if I can be out in my garden, in like I call my secret garden along my deck,
Okay.
um, it works for me. And then walking our two dogs, um, those things really help.
So it's
Um,
getting out in nature and kind of
yeah,
just,
yeah. It helps you breathe. It helps you move. It is. You can go to church or whatever your spirituality is, but being out in nature and life is spiritual to me,
Mhm.
right? My mother's a shaman, and she believes that everything has a faith spiritual touch to it, right? Whether it's the trees that Mother Nature created, the lawn, the flowers that you've been blessed to bloom. So that's kind of a spirituality thing for me. And then I watch what I'm ingesting. Not too much alcohol. Not too much. Comfort food.
Sure.
Even though sweet teeth, all of these, not just one.
Yeah.
But those things help me to get through. Those are my intentional self-care things.
Yeah. That's awesome. So one more question for you.
Yeah.
So if Devon was still here and you had the opportunity to say one thing to him now, after you have gone through this journey and you have, um, you know, learned all the things that you've learned, and what would you say to him?
Mm, yeah. We talked in the sidebar if there was a question that we wouldn't want to discuss, and I said, no, nothing out there is off the tables. And if I
You
get
forgot
emotional,
that one was on there, huh?
yeah, if I get emotional, that's okay. And
Yeah,
first and foremost, I just want to tell him I love him once again. You know,
yeah,
I miss him
definitely.
so much. I miss him so much every day.
Yeah,
Um, I would tell him it's okay to ask for help. You know, and you don't have to wear that mask, son. Um, we're all humans, and all humans have emotions.
yeah. Well, I thank you for, your candor, and I thank you for, always being willing to jump in and share the story of Devon and his life. And, you are a force, my friend, who is out there doing all the great things, that I'm sure, given different circumstances, you'd love not to be out doing all
Absolutely.
this if it meant, having Devon back here. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But we
uh,
can't
you know,
turn, you can't get Chelsea back. I can't get Devin back. And look, the reality is I am but one person multiplied by two. Tracy multiplied by three, Sabrina multiplied by four, you know, and we are force multipliers out there. And the more we have discussions like this, open and vulnerable discussions like this, transparent discussions like this, the more our society is going to change, and we can end this nonsensical stigma about talking about suicide
mhm,
and losing people to suicide. So I just want to be in concert with those like yourselves um, who are really to really stand up and have a conversation
yeah,
and help people through these conversations.
yeah. And of course, this was a tough conversation. Want to, you know, let everybody know that if you are struggling with thoughts of suicide yourself, or you just need someone to talk to because this grief gets heavy from time to time, call 988. That's a great resource. That's our national
Yes.
hotline. You can go to our website, journeythroughgrief.com. Um, I'm gonna put all the contact stuff. I'm gonna put information about Philip in the show notes. I'm gonna put his, pause acronym in there for that tool. So please make sure that you're looking at the notes. And I hope that you come back and see us um, other episodes that we're going to do along this same topic. Again, peace be with all of you, and thanks again, Phil, for joining us and taking the time, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.